Hey, Tim. I hope you've had a great week. Let me get started. The focus this week is a story that I heard at the end of last year when we were all in the middle of adjusting to the pandemic. I think we're all now pretty used to the idea of the fact that things are changing quite rapidly and often. And many of us are spending most of our work hours at home and adjusting to working at home and being at home and managing the family and all that stuff. And that's becoming a new norm. But what I wanted to talk about today was a story from a particular client of mine that happened sort of around that October time of 2020. And I remember walking into their offices early in the year in February, March, and I'll draw it for you in a minute, but they've got a configuration where when everyone arrives in the morning, they go up onto this level and they all sit next to each other in workstations and do their work. And when I'd meet this particular client, I'd walk in, get out the lift, walk in, go into a meeting room, and I'd walk past these workstations and realized that no one ever talked to one another. Like, it was dead silent. Now, this is a left brain profession. I won't even say what profession it is. And what I mean by left brain is it tends to be less relational and more logical, analytical kind of profession. So maybe they didn't need to talk to one another, but I think about that from a team perspective. And, one of the key jobs you've got is to get your team connected, to have a single purpose and getting them feel connected and trusting and working with one another. And I kind of think, maybe they're missing a trick. So what I'm going to talk about today is, I think you're all starting to learn about this reality of how to work differently. But one of the aspects of that is that if you're just sort of thinking about, utilizing your workspace in the old way, maybe that's not the way you move forward with it. So just to revise two things, what I'm doing here is a guy I know well, he's now, and most people have got a blended situation where they're either purely working from home, or they're in a blended situation where they've got 1 or 2 days in the office and some at home, or some are back in the office, right? But either way, I think you can learn from how to use the office and how to use home differently. 5 principles are covered: prioritizing collaboration and connection, which is essentially the idea that when you're in the office, prioritize relationships and connection because you've got that face-to-face time. The water cooler conversation is all about don't plug your, when you're in the office, don't plug your, basically all your schedule full of meetings. Make time for the informal, because the informal is often what matters, and that's what builds that trust and those connections. And then what I'm going to talk about today is the idea of, that's not right. Let's go here, of not being a desk monkey. So let's talk that through. So here's the client that I talked about before. If you think about an 8-hour workday, right? Which is not even reality anymore. But anyway, let's just, for many it's either more or some it's less, or they're on shift work or whatever, but let's just go with that. Most of these people would do a 1-hour commute, get ready for work, get up, get there. They do a 1 hour at the end. So let's say it was kind of a 7 to a 6 or a 6:30 work span. And then they'd come into the office, they'd walk up and then they'd sit down here, and there'd be kind of a workstation like this, and they'd have a big, they'd have a big kind of barrier between them all, right? This, and that barrier was sort of, 30 to 60 centimeters, 300 high. And so they couldn't really see the person next to them. And I would walk past and they'd all be sort of sitting there, silent. I just thought this was kind of weird. It was like something back to like the 18th century. And it just didn't seem to fit anymore. But I think, a lot of the clients I walk into, that's kind of what it's like. So I just wonder if we can start to think as leaders and sort of the way we do teamwork, we start to think about this a little bit differently. 2 things to think about. One is how we use time. And the second is how we start to use space. So this one's kind of the space. That one's kind of the time. how do we lay things out? How do we think about time a little bit differently? So the first thing that's changed that is, I guess, the way we think about the use of virtual spaces. And, if you're running a meeting virtually, you've got, in terms of space, you've got this one-to-many opportunity where, yes, it's not the same as face-to-face, but you can have as many people in a virtual space. Well, you're limited by bandwidth at this point, but I know, with Zoom that I use, you can have 500 people in that space. And it's a great way to do a one-to-many when you want to kind of educate someone on an idea. Now, if you want to get engagement in a virtual, you nearly need to think about how you create interaction. And one of the challenges I've got, even with these Facebook Lives, is they're kind of one way, unless you guys are live on them asking questions, which I would love, by the way, to get that. So you've kind of got those spaces. The other thing that does is, if you're running your team meeting virtually, people are not commuting. So, they've got the hour in the morning and in the afternoon for themselves or family, right? So I know a lot of people, they actually felt a greater sense of balance out of that. And I think, if on the balance of things, I think you'd be better to encourage people, rather than to work, to actually use that time for themselves, because that's what they're doing anyway, commuting, right? And I think it's a great way, where mental health has become a huge business issue. Getting them to utilize that time in a great way, in a positive way for themselves, is a great way to go. Now, second thing here is how we use physical spaces. So, we've kind of got the old way, which is the workstation, and the old way, and this was designed to produce the most output, to give people the most quiet time where they could think. And there's still those spaces, right? There's still meeting rooms in most offices where they can do this. The thing is, work has changed though. So rather than work being about repetition and quality and speed, there's a large part of work now, which is because, let's be honest, that this work here, the desk monkey work, is going to be automated by tech. I won't say by robots, but you know what I mean. In the next 10 to 15 years, something like 50% of our jobs are going to be lost. What we've got to do is start to engineer spaces for creativity. And, I'm not an interior designer. I've got a couple of mates who run companies like that. But one thing I know is that the desk monkey thing don't work, right? That the expectation that people sit there and just do their stuff is not going to get you the creativity you want. And here's the thing, is that we're moving into a space now where ideas and innovation become a path to success, not quality, speed, and repetition. So for me, it's then about how do you get people interacting with one another, challenging one another, and sharing ideas for the benefit of your purpose. And how as a leader could you purposely sometimes disrupt this system now that you've kind of got the pandemic as an excuse to do it? Okay, so let me summarize. I'm doing a series on this whole work from home, work from office deal. We're all adjusting to it. Don't be a desk monkey is really about how you use time and space differently. Time and space. And we have got an opportunity here to reset ourselves away from the sort of traditional kind of model of output, quality, time, repetition, into engineering spaces and time to create innovation and new ideas. So what I would challenge you to do is to say, okay, really think about how you are setting expectations for your team, for your business around time and space and when they use it. And are you using them optimally for what you need right now? Let me just close that off. Well, it's a bit close to the video there, wasn't I? Sorry. So during this week, hopefully I'll plug that into your head. If you've got any specific questions about how you create teamwork in your organization, you want to ask me about how I work with your top 3 levels of leaders to create the time and space for them for teamwork to occur, just drop me a line, comment down below, or send me a message, and we can just work out if there's something I can help you with. Take care. Enjoy the week.